Boom. Here we go. This is it. Firehouse Vigilance Weekly Scrap number 37. Today we have on Marc Davidson, Fairfax County Fire Rescue with Officer Development Training. He's got 28 years in the fire service, 8 years in the U.S. military, instructor that specializes in officer development training, fireground decision making, company officer leadership, recruit training, truck company ops. I thoroughly enjoy all you share on your social media platforms and look forward to talking to you today. And I want to say it's a pleasure to have you on Weekly Scrap number 37. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you. Appreciate being here. Really appreciate the opportunity. I mean, any chance I get to nerd out on spreading the word about what the fire service should be doing,
Right on.
I jump on it. So I really do appreciate it. Good stuff you do. I appreciate what you do too. I always say strong meme game. Your memes, I dig those. Really rock.
I do appreciate it. To everyone watching live, if you have questions for Marc Davidson, please don't hesitate to send them in, and he will absolutely answer them. We'll do our best to answer them. And did I miss anything? You are a captain, correct? Or
yes,
lieutenant? I saw both captain online, so I was doing my research trying to make sure. So I'll call you Cap as we go throughout this, not mess it up.
Just Mark.
Anything I missed on the introduction? Anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, that kind of boils it down. I always say more generically, at this point, it's 35-year public servant. Just went over 25 years on the job in Fairfax, did 3 years volunteering. And the math gets kind of funky because it's over 8 years dressing like a tree, 28 years of fire and rescue stuff. And then people are like, how do you get to 35? Well, my last year in the service was when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grow up. And so I took an EMT class, started volunteering off base when I had an opportunity to, when we weren't deploying, and just to see what was I going to do. And that's how it worked out. So a little bit of an overlap, but total 35 years of public service.
Wow. How long you plan on going?
That's a great question. I am in a battle for my life. As much as I have enjoyed this idea of building out officer development training as a new capacity for my organization, it was an unintended path that got me back into training and back at the academy and off the line. And I'm in the battle of my life to get back on the line. So we'll see. I still haven't really figured out. I would say a minimum I'll do 3 more, and it could be more than that. But,
okay. All right. I'm not trying to pin you down.
Yeah, no, we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
All right. I'm going to lead off my first question, which is I was reading your articles getting ready for this, and I heard the term bucket firefighter. And I don't know if that's just a Virginia East Coast type deal or what, but I wanted to hear you define it. From the way you used it, I kind of have an idea, but go ahead.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's a regional or specific to our organization, but bucket firefighter for us is the 2 firefighters in back. Left bucket and right bucket is the term we apply. Typically, and over the last many years, we've been able to get full force staffing on our special service companies also and ALS providers. So generally speaking, and we're having some problems with this, all our suppression units, min staff of 4, driver, officer, left bucket is typically the ALS provider, right bucket is EMT firefighter.
Okay. So it's just another term for jump seat, kind of almost.
Yeah, basically the assigned firefighters to us, the bucket positions are the 2 in back. I have it's funny, I never really even thought about it over 25 plus years. Just like, oh yeah, the buckets. I don't know whether maybe back in 1872, they had a bucket they were sitting on, and that started the whole thing. I have no idea.
Okay, I had to ask because I figured it was. But I didn't know if it referred to actual truck and a platform operations or something. But anyway,
gotcha.
I could different.
Never thought about it. Never gave it a second thought till now. I'm like, I'm gonna have to look that up now.
I want to tell everybody I thoroughly enjoy your posts on social media because you are a great filter. You go out and find the stuff, and then you post it, and you give your take on it usually. And so if you haven't followed Marc Davidson's officer development with officer development training, it's a great page to follow just to pick up good articles. Like I said, he's a great filter, like a vacuum that picks it up and spits it out. An amazing filter for what you share. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate it. My my goal with that, I very much stovepipe my social media. I'm not one of those folks who's, hey, I'm going to the corner, I'm going to the Stop and Rob to get some coffee. You know, hey, here I am. You know, I have my web page or Facebook page with just kind of personal stuff. I don't put a lot on there, just if something strikes me. I got this one for fire department, and you know, to me, the focus is leadership and being better at the job and our craft. And then I have one for my old company in the service, and you know, kind of each one is its own thing.
Okay.
I try not to bleed it over, just my thing. But yeah, I enjoy doing that because to me, curating, I guess would be a term.
That's a good term for it.
I want to get good stuff out there that's going to be of value that hopefully if somebody picks it up, looks at it, makes a difference. They're like, oh, cool, I didn't think about that. Or this is good stuff that I can apply to where I'm at. Because there's just so much, I don't know the politest way to put it. There's just so much crap out there. Social media is, you know, people just, they have no filters. They don't have any sense of some obligation for responsibility. They just throughput a bunch of crap.
Yep.
And hopefully for the folks that are part of that group, you know, they can go to it and it's a haven from politics and, you know, whatever issues of the day. Hey, I want to know more about our craft, our trade, and that's what it is.
I appreciate it. And like you said, it's no filter, low consequence, anonymity of just posting sometimes completely unvetted opinions, and there's so much, like you said, so much crap.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate what you put out there. Now then, I'm going to get into the meat of this. 95, I'm spitballing a number here because it kind of depends on how busy your department is, but 95% of what we do as firefighters is not tactical decision making on the fire ground. It is dealing with our personnel around the firehouse, in the culture, in the training, and all that kind of things. And so, and I know that's a big part of what you help develop people to work with. So basically, I'm going to kick it off there and say, talk about developing the ability to work with those personnel and deal with those personnel issues, and where do you start with that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, whatever happens in the firehouse is going to dictate what happens on the fire ground. And if you have dysfunction in the firehouse, their dysfunction will display itself on the fire ground. And I use that term broadly, incidency. You know, it doesn't, you know, EMS, you know, that whole discussion, separate thing. Bottom line is, when we're out after the tones drop, that dysfunction will display itself. And we have so many legacy leaders, and I don't use that as a polite term when I use it. We have so many legacy leaders who they'll say literally, hey, whatever happens there doesn't matter. When the tones drop is when our business, you know, we go about our business and things get done. And that's completely backwards. That idea that somehow there's a light switch for dysfunction doesn't exist. It's only going to get worse because now you're under stress. Your timelines are compressed. You're making in extremis decisions with high consequence, and you haven't laid a foundation with the team that you have to work with. And you just say, hey, don't worry, we'll figure it out when we get there, is essentially the way I interpret that. And that idea, and when I bring up this conversation, I'll always ask a group, you know, what percentage of your calls on a given day are truly in extremis, lives in the balance? It's you know, if they're saying more than 1, 5, if 10%, I'm like, okay, even, you know, the guys in FDNY in the Bronx are not at that percentage. How are you? And again, going to that idea that fundamentally that dysfunction, it's not just about, you know, the easy things, training, you know, that idea of how as a leader you are going to train your people and value that, and not have everybody riding the couch and, oh, today is Employee Appreciation Day, or, oh my God, there's football or marbles in a bowl, we can't possibly go out and train. You know, that idea holds nothing. But then you get to the hard stuff, you know, when you have somebody that you're cutting away on your crew because of fill in the blank. They don't meet my expectations, I don't like them. And then you can start really getting dysfunctional. You know, they're this, they're that, you know, they don't get it. They don't understand. They're not part of the brotherhood. They're not part of the sisterhood as they should be. Well, as soon as that starts happening, how do you expect success on the incident scene? It doesn't happen. So those are the hard conversations that I think the fire service has to get to, is is the understanding that what you need is a functional leadership environment in a firehouse that will set the table for success on the fire ground. But how do you get to that point? That's the $1 million question, because again, no fire chief issues a general order or a bulletin or a SOG or SOP that says be effective, be nice, don't be an asshole is kind of the real bottom line to this. Treat your people with respect and train them and get them to be effective for our citizens. They could do that all day long. But if we don't train our people and what that looks like and how you go about doing that, they can't possibly succeed. Right. So it's not only that we should demand and expect it from our leaders, but we have to resource that. We have to give them those tools, and that's frankly that's what the fire service sucks at. So
there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I've always said, we're like, congratulations, you passed the test. Here's a badge. Hope you do good.
Yeah, I mean, just think about that. The quote I throw at this, and I hate to beat it to death, but to me it's fundamentally true. If the American military trained its leaders the way the American fire service does, we would be like the French and get our asses kicked all day long. We just would. We'd never win a war. We just couldn't possibly, because the template that the American fire service has, and I have a whole historical rant and view on that evolution compared to the military, just lends itself to this idea that take a test, get voted on, and again, it's nothing about volunteer career and none of that crap. It's just a function of how do you select and train for leadership, and in large measure you don't. You're voted in. You're the guy that dad bought the equipment. You took the test and managed to luck up and end up at the top of the list, maybe, or through hard work and diligence, you're at the top of the list. But it doesn't matter. A test is not preparing you for the environment you're about to go to. That would be a great test if it did.
Sign me up for that test because I want a copy of it.
And again, just looking at what the American military does, where they train constantly. It is a imperative, starting in basic training, recruit training, all the way through to the general of the Army. They're in training and education, post promotionally for an entire career. And if there's more than a handful of places that are at least saying, oh, well, we got to train our lieutenants, because we were in that same model. We had what we called officer development school. Like that meant you were checked off for the rest of your career. You could
you're good to go.
You're good to go. You had this
2-week class.
It was 4 days.
Oh, okay,
it was better. 4 days in the basement of a firehouse. I had a retinue of deputy chiefs coming through explaining what they did. There was no tactical training. There was mostly some administrative things,
sure.
But there's no discussion about effective leadership. There was no discussion about tactics and strategy. No discussion about the stressors you're about to get into. None of that. And that cleared me. And it was just jarring when I finally woke up one day and said, okay, so I came out of this environment where this is what they did. This is how they did it. There was this systems-based approach to training for leadership. And I'm in this environment where, quite literally, my first year on the job, I nearly left because I was part and parcel in a dysfunctional leadership environment. And within 4 months, I was looking for the exit. And it took me a while to finally make this connection. And that's where the whole small unit leadership thing, and then fast forward to this opportunity to get involved with training our officers in-house. And it's a 12-year story, but to be at the point we're at now, where we formalize this section, we're about to get our second captain for the unit. I'm sorry, I laugh when I say that. The officer development training unit. You were looking at it for a while.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that was it for 3+ years. But we're about to get our number 2 position.
Nice.
Created a battalion chief's position that's going to create an umbrella structure for that and professional like that. So the organization is moving. I'm very grateful to my organization that they're moving forward and they're doubling down on this idea.
Awesome.
The strategic leaders, the fire chief on down, are saying, yeah, this is where we need to be. But interestingly enough, he also has a military background, and he understands that dynamic. So I think that helped play into that decision from his perspective. And then I've been very fortunate that we've got support from every level with otherwise within the organization. So
now I get to see some of the posts you make with the pictures, the snapping the pictures of the officer development program. I believe it's from your department and stuff, and it's just
yes,
it looks so in depth with scenarios running, and then how to deal, like you do dealing with an unruly employee or
yes,
all that kind of stuff. It just looks fascinating because looks like it's been well developed. A couple things I want to touch on. First question I want to ask, and of course we can rabbit hole all day long here. So
yeah. No, please.
But
you got to be in charge. So I'll go off on a tangent.
I'm getting ready. I'm saying, I really don't know. How did we get here as the American Fire Service to where? How did we?
I look at it. Everything's about history. To me, everything is about history, and our history is coming out of a largely volunteer force that took care of this country for decades, centuries, and going back to, the Plymouth Rock and that whole narrative of taking care of the village and the bucket brigade. And it's not that we didn't have a leadership imperative back then. Somebody had to be in charge of the bucket brigade to get all the citizens to line up. So maybe by the time the bucket made it up to the front of the line, there was
some water in it.
a cup of water to maybe do something about this problem. But the issue coming out of that legacy is that just because it is what it is, there wasn't a merit system. There wasn't a selection process. There wasn't a training and education process to get there. You fast forward to the Civil War, that becomes a real linchpin for the American Fire Service. And coming out of that, there's a move towards as the cities rebuild and all these former military folks are coming out of the military, and they need, what did the cities need? They needed people with physical courage, mechanical skills, ability to adapt, ability to work within a paramilitary structure.
Sure.
Hey, look, we got all these guys. That of course is why we wear blue and not gray, but that's a story for another day.
Okay.
And so at the end of it, we move into that, and then as career fire service takes over, the civil service component, merit-based system takes place. It's all about a test. The test was everything, and that's fine. But what they missed was a key element of a testing process needs a training and education process to couple with it, because now all you're doing is evaluating whether they are prepared for it. And especially when you look at large city systems where it was literally a 100-question written test, that was it. Now we have these assessment centers. They're a little broader, they're a little more in depth, that helps, but you're still only evaluating what you have, and it's a relative score. So if your top person scores a 71 and that's a passing grade, they may be number one on the list, but we could make an argument that they still suck.
Right. No, absolutely.
But they're the number one person on the list because that's all you were testing for, was whether they pass a test. And so the training and education part, and again, looking at the parallel with the military, where you have a selection process, and I'm not saying that's the business we should be in. We should, not for a second suggesting Parris Island, Fort Benning, right. Ranger School. No. But what I'm saying is, if we look at the template for that system where we train, educate, and then we go into this evaluation and let's pick the best of the best of the best, sir, then that's where we should be at. And the training and education component is what's seriously lacking. Right. And it's easy to understand why. It costs money. No,
absolutely. Money and time and effort. And
yes, a lot. Yep.
Someone has to be really dedicated to make that happen.
Yep. And if I could on that point, because one of the things that I talk about is significant, because people are like, oh, Fairfax County, Brunacini came to us one time, and he made a joke because, we had a big conference and he's there and all the rigs showed up and we had, it's all pretty, Brunacini makes a joke that, oh, Fairfax County, you're looking good. It looks like when you run out of gas with your rigs, you just go buy new ones. Ha ha ha. Funny, dun.
Right.
And of course, that was the pot calling the kettle. But at the end of the day, this perception that Fairfax County, which is very resource rich and they, all that other good stuff, well, of course they can do this. We can't do that because, look, we don't have the pockets they have.
Sure.
And this solution to this problem, which is fundamental to the fire service, is completely scalable. It can be done with limited resources, because the start of our programs wasn't a top-down solution. There was no boss saying, hey, do this. If anything, it was a ground-up solution where several troops were basically pushing. And so the work was pro bono. The work was, what can we do with no resources and still achieve training? And that's why I am confident nobody can make this argument, we're pulling out rabbit ears, so we can't help you and we'll just have to do what we do. No, you can do it. It can be done.
Right on.
It has to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one was legacy leader. You mentioned it. You kind of defined it there for a minute, but touch on legacy leader and what you mean by that.
Yeah, to me, it's almost a pejorative. It's not I don't view it as a compliment in the way I use the phrase. Now there's legacy leaders and there's a leadership legacy. It's a turn of a phrase, but a leadership legacy is a good thing. You're leaving something behind of value. You have provided something. But to me, a legacy leader is still in this school of thought that, hey, I took a test. I'm in charge. So whatever I say goes. Don't question me. We will do things the way we've always done them because change is, why would I want to change? I don't need to learn, study, continue to push because I've already made it. Your job is, if you want this, is you have to work like I did and get to it. And since nobody helped me, I had to bust my ass. You got to bust your ass. Right. And I'm just going to sit back and watch. And so that it's almost a comic book figure, but sure. The frustrating part is that caricature is alive and well. I'll say fundamentally throughout the fire service, but I can tell you for sure in my organization, and that's why I battle every day. That's why I push every day, and because it's an absolute need. We've got to do better than that. We can't have that mentality exist in the firehouse because they absolutely destroy the people underneath them. That's how and then people vote with their feet. And in I always say the most objective metric for us to identify dysfunctional leaders is to look at our transfer request list. And I can cite case studies where I've looked at that, identified an entire shift which has requests to get out to anywhere. They're not even saying where. They're just like
not
anywhere
here.
But here.
Not here.
And then this is the best part. It's literally a science experiment. Then watch when a new leader gets transferred in for whatever the reason was, and all those transfer requests go away within weeks. That is as objective a metric as you can have for dysfunction, and we need to identify those. And then again, this is the hard part. We can't just go, oh well, they suck. So what are you going to do? Let's just move them to the other side of the county, the city, whatever. No, that means we need to train and educate them. Now it becomes a battle to say, hey, look, we've got to have a heart to heart. We've got to provide you with the resources because something you've got, and it's always about their genetics, their DNA. I say, look at their DNA when you rewind the clock to 25 years before, 20 years before where they landed. And then it's like, oh, now I understand why every day that ends with Y is a day off or Employee Appreciation Day. Every Sunday we got to hang out, that's what they landed, running 2 part-time businesses out of the back office.
Sure.
I don't have time for this fire department stuff. I got things to do, man. So yeah, that's the battle. And that legacy leader is kind of the center of the bullseye for what I hope we can accomplish.
Gotcha. Okay. That explains that. And I love the term. So that's why I wanted to ask. Soft skills versus hard skills. That's the next thing I wanted to touch on, and how important the soft skills are. I mean, we all know the importance of the hard skills. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But I don't for a second want anybody ever in our courses or in talking with people about this to think, oh, Davidson's just saying, don't worry about it. Whatever happens in the firehouse is more important than what happens at the fire ground. No, not at all. Tactical proficiency is a leadership skill. It's an absolute requirement for effective leaders, because if you're not competent on the incident scene, how will you build trust? I can't trust you if you don't know what you're doing when we get on the working fire with reported trapped. I can't trust you if you put us on the roadway and you're making dumb decisions that are going to get me hurt or killed or the people on work. I can't trust you. So those hard skills are super critical, and they do take a lot of work to become proficient at. The issue, and oh man, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. All so right. The issue is that at the end of the day, and I'm not saying this to demean our craft at all, but I'm just going to put it out there. If I put up a picture of a burning building on the wall and I bring in a young third grader and I say, young lady, young man, Okay, everywhere you see fire, you're going to tell somebody with a hose to go there. Everywhere you see a window, you're going to see somebody who's dragging their knuckles on the ground to throw a ladder. And everywhere else in that building, you're going to get these kind of dull expressioned individuals who they call squad guys and gals.
Okay.
And you're going to tell them to go look for people. Can you do that for me? Can you do it? And then I'll pop up a burning building and they'll do that. Now, obviously, that's a joke. That's a lot of sarcasm. But fundamentally, the hard skills can be taught to just about anybody.
Sure.
And with repetition, they can achieve proficiency and mastery, which is our ultimate goal. Teaching somebody how to deal with two troops out in the high bay that are about to go at it, teaching somebody and training somebody to understand what to do when somebody walks into the office, closes a door, and starts crying. Teaching somebody when you get a phone call at dark saying that essentially they are close to ending their life. Those are soft skills, and that's a crap argument to say they're hard. They're incredibly hard. They're harder than dragging a hose line. They're harding. And the part that frustrates me is that we have a generation of leaders who are conflict avoidant. That's conflict. That's stress. They don't want to deal with that because they're saying, "Oh, I don't have time for that. But let's go run the calls and save lives. That's why I'm here. I'm not here for that. Your problems at home. I'm not here that your daughter is sick. I'm not here for whatever." Leave that shit at the door. And the best analogy I heard for that was a very good friend of mine who's in behavioral health, who said, that's no different than coming in out of a driving rain. You cross the threshold into a firehouse, you look down, there's going to be drops of water there. You can't just dry off in the millisecond you cross the threshold. So you're bringing that with you. And those soft skills and the ability to engage your people and lead them effectively is incredibly difficult because it's an art. It's not a science. The science part, hey, how many feet of line, how many ladders, where do you throw them? That science part we can teach and get people to a point of proficiency and mastery. The people part takes a lot more work, and sometimes it takes a lifetime. But the problem is we don't effectively resource that and teach our people those skills, and that's where the dysfunction starts.
Wow. Oof. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, it's dark. I mean, I hate to put it that way, because that paints a very dark picture for the American Fire Service, but I believe it to be true because the little bit I've been fortunate enough to travel and talk with people from other departments and across the country and engage in this conversation, I don't know anybody that's ever disagreed or fundamentally said, "Oh no, we're doing that. We're doing that. We're teaching
right.
Not only our leaders at every level, because those problems start to look different as a battalion chief compared to a unit officer, a lieutenant, or a captain. We're also teaching them to our recruits because they are the future leaders. And if we start this foundation early, then we can build upon that so that by the time they become formal leaders, they are not only effective followers, they have the skills they need to be effective leaders. And it just doesn't exist, because how much time does it take to teach somebody to deploy a ground ladder? You can quantify that in days and sets of reps. I can generally get a new recruit to be proficient at throwing a 24 in 2 training days with, let's say, a baker's dozen sets of reps. They'll get it. And then it's just a matter now of making them masters of that.
Sure.
How long does it take to teach somebody how you deal with conflict, how you deal with somebody who has suicidal ideations, how you resolve issues between 2 people or somebody that's in conflict with you, and do that well?
Right.
Oof.
Yeah.
How
many
that's
days?
The problem.
No,
yeah. That's the problem. So,
man, I want to come take your class. So I'm gonna at least come.
Well, I'll send you whatever we got, and you know, I ship out our content packages all the time. If anybody's listening or cares, and they can email me, and we're very open source. I have this whole rant against fire service golems. That's a nerdy reference, but you know that I invented this. I invented this. You didn't invent anything, dude.
Right.
None of us invented anything. So
nothing new.
We'll send you out whatever we got.
All right, I'm gonna move on and say,
yes.
And anything you want to keep on harping on, let me know, because I'm enjoying the preaching. Have you seen a generational difference in your years of training and instructing and basically instructing leaders, the future leaders? Have you seen a generational difference in their values and their just the differences and how you've dealt with that or learned to deal with it or what you've learned?
Yeah. So I've got a counter argument to that idea of generational differences. It goes back to my last year in the service as I was figuring it, again, trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grow up. And I remember reading, I believe it was Firehouse, could have been Fire Engineering, pretty sure it's Firehouse, a letter to the editor thing in there, just caught my eye for some reason. And basically it was this guy who was on a rant about how this next generation of firefighters was going to be the death of the fire service. They were lazy, entitled. Everybody wants a trophy. They don't like to hear no. And I'm sitting here reading this outside of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, going, dude, I've just spent 8+ years dressed like a tree in all sorts of fun and exciting things. And you're telling me that I'm going to make this thing suck. And I just read that. I generally, like with social media, I don't respond to people. I don't get engaged. I view that as the worst platform in the world to try and have an argument. And same with letters to the editor. What am I going to do? But that I truly felt pissed off reading that. Like, come on, you don't even know me. And to say that I'm the source that my generation is going to screw this up. And I guarantee you, Ben Franklin probably read a letter, the same thing about, yes,
the next
generation is going to screw this up. And he's going, wait a minute, I'm trying to make this thing better. It's just this, I don't fundamentally believe from everything that I've been involved in training from my time, that's where the bug bit me for training and education was in the service coming up till now. I don't fundamentally believe in that argument. I think it's an excuse for weak leadership. I think it's an excuse for people who don't understand that their obligation is to understand the other person. Dual perspective, just like for effective training, is what effective leaders engage in. They understand their people. And to that point, I use a clip from Band of Brothers where Richard Winters, who's the leader we would all want to be.
Oh, right? Yeah, no doubt about it.
Just come on, that's the guy. And one of his, actually it was Buck Compton, and they're interviewing, that's the beauty of that series. And when we talk about
I love the end of that, yes.
Where they're interviewing the actual guys, the greatest generation. And Buck Compton is interviewed talking about Richard Winters. And he says something that to me just is like hits me with a ton of bricks every time I talk about it. He says that he knew his people, he knew their wants and needs, he knew their desires. And if I put a 22-year-old from Portlandia with a man bun and skinny jeans and a flannel shirt and Crocs, and I'm not dismissing, if that's your gig, hey, beautiful. I can't do the man bun thing, but rock on. If I put that image in that same quote, and threw that into a Firehouse, oh my God, the generation Z, X, Y, millennial, they all suck. They all need hugs. They need kisses, blah, 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 blah. No, this is coming from the greatest generation. And that leader understood that he had to understand his people truly in order to get the most out of them, in order to take care of them. Because how can you do that if you don't know who your people are? And so to me, that excuse for weak leadership is that, they're just different. They don't understand.
Right.
Did you ask? Did you, what are they bringing to the table? One of the most mature firefighters I know is he was in my company before I got back to the academy, 22, 23, has his own part-time business. He bought a house. At his age, I was a train wreck. I was a freaking train wreck. And this kid has his act together. And that's the point. Meanwhile, I know 47-year-olds who are going on 19.
Right.
And so, so to just generalize, and then I'll say this and I'll get off this rant because I could go an hour on this alone.
You get preach, man.
At the end of it, we have allowed in the fire service this idea to be dismissive of somebody because of the day they were born. They were born on this day, so they must have a soft spot in their head, and they are probably the IQ of a cheerleader. They gotta be because they're born 22 years ago. They're idiots. If we did that in any other category, where we dismiss somebody because of the color of their skin, where they were born, the way they talk, just pick a category, we'd be fired,
Right.
and rightfully so. But they're this age, so they're idiots. No, how do you treat somebody like that? And to me, it's a story about how leaders should understand their people. With that same idea, you need to ask. You need to understand who they are. What are they bringing to the table? That guy or gal that you're dismissing, they may have been, who knows, an accountant, and you're thinking, what does that bring to the table? Well, if you're a station captain and you've got to do a budget and you can't add 2 and 2, you may want to rely on your accountant firefighter. But if you don't know, if you haven't asked, then you'll never understand what you have. So, yeah, that's my counter argument. I don't fundamentally believe in it. Do we have people who are complete train wrecks that are 22? Absolutely. Do we have people that are 47 that are complete? Absolutely. What does that tell me? That it doesn't matter. It's about the individual and figuring out, as a leader, what can I draw out of them? What are they going to give to me? What can I get them to do for me, for the organization, for the citizen? That's everything.
Yes, love it. The individual, accountability, assigning responsibility. I love
expectations.
There you go. There you go.
The whole gig.
Mark Alone said, and I think he was referencing the soft skills versus hard skills. He said, especially when we aren't teaching those skills to begin with. I think he was referencing how hard it is to deal with some of those issues we were discussing.
Yeah.
Leaders.
And I appreciate Mark Alone for a lot of good reasons. Great guy, but he spells his name correctly. So I feel great kinship with him.
All right. Fair enough.
Cheers, Mark.
The leaders, born or developed, which is more important, I guess, what I'm really getting at.
Yeah, fundamentally developed. They're not even at a moment's hesitation. To suggest that somehow genetically somebody's born predisposed to lead would mean that every one of Patton's children, Schwarzkopf's children, Napoleon's kids, whatever, the genetics should be holding true throughout the history. We would have a leadership class, and it would just be the sons and daughters of these great leaders. And that is so fundamentally not true. To suggest that, as an example, my daughter, who at the time I was certain was going to be a CEO or dictator of a small island nation, was born to be a leader, is clearly off point. She is 4 or 5. She's a kid. Your brain's just not wired for that. But what she did see was a strong woman in her house who was telling this guy to do stuff, and stuff was getting done. She goes, "Oh, I want to be like her." That's who I need to be like. Yes. Modeling. And essentially, at every turn, they are being trained and educated. So when you look at somebody who is an effective leader and you go, "Oh, they're just born to it." No, they're not. They had a coach, father, mother, cousin, uncle, something. They didn't have to. When we talk about training and education, it doesn't have to be in a classroom. It doesn't have to happen at West Point, in a fire academy. It's modeling is a training and education environment. And so that idea is what fulfills those folks who don't have a formal setting to learn. And I always say the military proves this. To argue against it is to basically say, in America, don't you dare do this, is to basically say the U.S. military has it wrong.
Right.
Because they take a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid off the block, off the street, off the cornfield, wherever, who couldn't possibly lead a starving dog to bacon. But over the course of a handful of years, they train the hell out of them. They educate the hell out of them. They have an environment where they can model these behaviors because the system's in place that allows them to look at the next guy or gal and go, "Oh, I want to be like that." Because the system's, it's a cycle, and it's where do you jump into it? So they have that ability to see that behavior in action. They train and educate them so that within short order, within 2 or 3 years, they are making some of the most incredible decisions in extremis conditions with limited information, compressed timelines, and an absolute requirement to get it right, which is exactly what we need.
Yes.
I mean, it's
100%.
exactly what we need. And so that's it, which means that's what we need too, is that template. But to the point about born or developed, it's a learned art. It is a absolute learned art. And the other discussion I have with the military is, please don't assume that I'm saying the military is perfect. Like I just had this discussion the other day with somebody where they were kind of asking, well, how does the Marine Corps do it and this and that? And I said, well, they do all these things. There's training before, after, during, modeling, all that. And I said, even with all that, you still get some really sucky leaders. And they're like, they were just shook when I said that. I said, oh no, there's plenty of really sucky leaders in the Marine Corps. They couldn't believe I was saying that. I said, the difference is that those sucky leaders are maybe 30% of that environment. So you have a 7 out of 10 chance to come into an environment where you have effective leadership. My concern, in my view, is that in the American Fire Service, it's the other way around. Yeah. It's flipped.
I would say
we have a concept that I refer to as leadership by accident. We have a good unit officer here. We have a good battalion chief here, a good shift deputy over here, just kind of. But you ask them, what did the fire service teach you to what's in the sauce? What did the fire service, what did our organization teach you to put you where you're at? And if they even go, oh, I took officer 1 from the state, and that was just a formative lesson for me, and crap. No, of course it wasn't. What they do say, if there's anything tied in with the organization, is when they came in, they had a captain who took them under the wing.
Yeah, that mentor.
They had, and so that behavior was modeled. It wasn't taught in a systems-based approach and reinforced and get to that point. They just got lucky. And that's a crazy way.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Business. That's just not a good way. We've never heard of IBM or Amazon or Google if they were just like, let's give it a coin toss and see what happens.
What is it? The hope is not a strategy?
Exactly.
That's it?
Exactly.
Oh, that's beautiful. Biggest challenges you have faced in teaching fire officer leadership, and the tips or anything you can pass on and how you've overcome those.
The biggest challenge, well, I guess there's 2. Resourcing is the first one. And for the first, if this is a 12-year arc that we've been on to get us to this point where we have this formalized section and it's being resourced heavily now, and that's all good stuff. The first 8 years of that in particular, I was repeatedly getting tapped on the head. That's cute, Davidson, but does it cost us money? Because if it costs us money, we can't do it. So we were nibbling around the edges. We were basically conducting a guerrilla campaign to teach our folks through the certification class process. So that idea of resourcing at the strategic level to say this is what we need to do is endemic in the fire service. It just, hey, you look at the training slice of the pie of any organization, it's already pretty small compared to operations. It's already pretty small. And you look at that, and that breaks out to basic training, recruit training, an overwhelming majority of that. You go to any fire service organization, they're investing heavily in that newest member, and rightfully so.
Sure.
But the problem is that leaves very little crumbs on the table to train your leaders, your officers. And frankly, if a probie comes out of a training process and does something stupid, honestly, that's a fire service joke. That's what you expect to happen. They're going to do something stupid in spite of all this training.
Right.
You're an idiot. The fire is this way. There's countless stories about probies doing dumb stuff.
Well, I can still remember my first fire. So.
Oh my God, I did so many dumb things. So but you can't have an new officer show up and make dumb decisions, because that's how people get hurt or killed. And so at that point, that resourcing is upside down, or it's not that you need to cut away from that. It just, the pie needs to get bigger. So resourcing is the biggest challenge in general, and people understanding, strategic leaders understanding, I have to double down, because again, they can issue orders all day long. It ain't going to happen on the street and in the firehouse unless they're trained to do it, whatever the issue is. The second part is a resistance, not from newer leaders, but from legacy leaders to be trained. And part of what we developed, we call it a continuum of training, is that this continuum starts at the recruit firefighter level and ends at the assistant chief level. And this follows, again, the military model. If you're a general in the Army, you are going to command and staff college. You're a mid-level officer, colonel, whatever. You're going to a war college. You're in this constant training education pipeline for your entire career. Fire service? Take some certification classes.
Here's your 4-day class.
Yeah. If you take EFO, that'll give you a shot to move up in the food chain. And again, writing a significant thesis paper is a good thing. There's value to that. But what does that do for training and educating how you're going to operate in an organization? And I would submit it is not the be all end all. It's a component, but where you have CPSC accreditation or your EFO, that's great, but that can't be it. So the resistance at that level, and I literally have had these conversations with chief officers, senior leaders in the organization at different times. Not pointing fingers at anybody. Who they're saying, well, the system worked for me. Why are we doing this?
Oh yeah, what's broken?
In my head, I'm screaming, did it? Did it really? Do we want to hang our hat on that? But out of respect, I'm just trying to push the thing along, and that's the problem, is that legacy leader doesn't even understand. They don't know what they don't know. And the first time we had a battalion chiefs officer development academy, that I would say as a cohort, and for all you guys out there and gals, sorry, they were resistant. Sure. And it took an honest conversation at the beginning of that class. It took the peers that we had established in the work group to develop the class to have some honest conversations, and then a course of instruction. And by the time they were done, they're going, yeah, I learned a bunch. Awesome. Because, the focus on high relevancy and effective training, I don't want to waste their time. That's a waste of my time. So, but they have to come in willing to learn. And that mind block is very prevalent throughout the fire service.
That's awesome. The 34 years, I'm doing 35 years, right?
35, yeah.
Ish. We'll say ish.
Yeah.
Getting it on, being engaged. How have you stayed engaged and motivated? Like, what is your secret to staying this plugged in and this passionate? I hope I'm as passionate. Give me 10 more years. I'm hoping.
Yeah. No. Trust me. There's been days.
Sure.
There's been days. Yes, it comes and goes. And
okay.
And again, when we look at particularly the last 3+ years in this position and pushing for this formalization of this process and all that, there's been a couple days where because you end up beating your head against the wall. But for all that, I've been very fortunate for the organization who has supported the effort, and then people who come in and say, yeah, no, it was worth it. And that's for any teacher, instructor, trainer. That when you hear a student come in, that it made a huge difference. It was when we have like these reality-based scenarios we do with conflict resolution, where we bring in dissimilar role players, we put them in these very uncomfortable situations, and they have to react well. Suicidal ideations, cultural differences, race, sex, conflict between two members, conflict with them. We have several scenarios where citizens, quote unquote, show up, and it'll be our civilian staff. And hey, I was at the Giant, and your firefighters are dropping F-bombs, and now little Timmy is saying F every other word, and I want somebody's ass, and I want an answer now. And you can't fail at that moment.
Right.
And so to have afterwards, months, years later, somebody come back and say that made a huge difference because I was put in that situation and I felt like I was able to handle it well. So that part, I think, is what keeps me going at this point. Although having said that, I'm jonesing to get back on a fire truck.
Fair enough.
Anyways.
Mark alone said he's a unicorn, bro. So there you go. All right. I like to always ask if you have a book that you suggest that firefighters should read. I always ask the guests, and I've never been disappointed. So hit it.
It to me, it's an easy one, and maybe it's too obvious, but I'll just say Band of Brothers. As a narrative to complement watching the series, because the series is filled with so many just critical leadership moments to learn from. And what I try and do is use the military as an analogy for the fire service. And again, not directly, hey, we got to have Paris Island. Hey, we've got to do Currahee. That's crap. If anybody's invested in that in the fire service and they think that's an effective model for training your firefighters, I would submit you're wrong, because you're in the wrong industry. If I was preparing somebody to do tip of the spear stuff, then you do those things. If you're preparing to be firefighters on the line and you think the Gunny Hartman routine is making them more effective, I think we could have a good discussion over that. But at the end of it, Band of Brothers is a narrative to fill in some of the blanks. and really understand what the backdrop for some of those leadership moments, and then to draw those out and say, why do we want to be like Richard Winters? What does Richard Winters mean for us in the fire service? What does a Lieutenant Dyke mean for us in the fire service? What does Captain Spears mean, or Lieutenant Spears mean for us in the fire? What are those moments analogous to in a firehouse? Because ultimately it has to be relevant. And if all we do is say, hey, read Band of Brothers or watch Full Metal Jacket and make it happen. No, we've got to translate that into our environment and how it becomes relevant for us.
That's awesome. Did you enjoy Beyond Band of Brothers?
I did not read that one, and a lot of people ask me about the Pacific, the whole Marine Corps thing. I honestly didn't enjoy that as much, because that campaign historically is just all these different things happening in different places. And the cool thing about Band of Brothers is following this one group through this entire arc of time.
Yes.
Just, to me, that was amazing.
From Curry all the way to the Eagle's Nest. I mean, it was just an amazing journey.
Just that journey, and what they did and what they experienced, and that to be able to identify those people throughout. Whereas the Pacific, it's just such a broad thing, and there were different places, and people like, where was Okinawa? Where was Saipan? And
Well, I love World War II, but I've always loved the Western Front. I love, and the Pacific Theater. I just never enjoyed as much. Not that it's not relevant. It's just I enjoyed the Third Army, the armored columns, the Battle of the Bulge, the 101st, D-Day. Anyway, yes. Yeah.
No, I can't disagree. Even as a jarhead, I enjoy the European theater as a discussion for military history. But I absolutely have to be dialed into my Pacific campaign, or else I'd be bad.
Sure. Okay, 5 questions for firefighters. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. Number one, what is the number one issue facing the modern fire service?
The failure, the abdication of the fire service to train its leaders. That is what will continue to choke us down, because these leadership fails are what end up on the 11 o'clock news. There's very rarely the channel 9 news saying, oh my God, company 2 put the hose line in the wrong place and they burned the house down, they suck. No, they don't care. They see the fire, they see firefighters. Hey, awesome, they saved the foundation.
Right, they saved that slab.
Woo! But what they do here on the 11 o'clock news is there was this sexist behavior in the firehouse. There was this hazing event. There was, this complaint. There's this. That's the stuff that is death by 1,000 paper cuts for the fire service. And those are all signs and symptoms of dysfunctional leadership.
Absolutely.
And then to just blame the people because they didn't get it is missing the point. We never trained them to prepare for that as leaders. So that failure is, to me, the number one issue.
Number one, that's a great answer. Number 2, what is the thing you are most excited about for the future of firefighting?
Having said that I see a lot more organizations who are starting to recognize that and invest in that training of their leaders at every level. It just seems like I'm hearing more and more stories about it, and that is very heartening. That is important. The other thing, and I refer to it as the upside of COVID, is just the explosion of content, particularly online, but even the craft conferences, these smaller conferences where, it only used to be about the big 3. And if you didn't hit one of those, you weren't catching anything.
Sure.
Now we have what I call the craft conferences popping up regionally. We have these webinars, Zoom platform, GoToMeeting, where just so much stuff is out there that it really is important, because now you can be at home, drinking your Yingling in your boxers and picking up some tips on rich strategies and whatever.
Sure.
And that's important, because training and education is what's going to make us better.
That's awesome. Number 3, best rank, according to Marc Davidson, best rank or position to be in the fire service.
Driver, not even a question. And more specifically, a driver where the ladder is on top of the rig, not on the sides. All that sloshy water stuff is horribly confusing. So a truck driver, to me, was for me the best position, because in a sense it was like being an NCO in the military, which is where I land. And you have all this all this authority on the incident scene to make things happen, but fundamentally none of the responsibility. If things go wrong, you're like, oh, why'd I do that? Cap, that was a stupid thing. Why'd you let me do that? And so, but particularly even compared to an engine driver, to me, the whole chess game of operating independent of a hose line, and then you're functionally much more involved on the fire ground. I'm not downrange pulling levers. No, I'm not breaking chops to engine drivers. But just to me, that was the best position I still think, if I take a drop back, I think I could still pay my bills. So,
if I get back to that truck driver. Number 4, best advice you've ever received.
3 pieces of advice from the 3 mentors that I view as helping keep me going in the fire service. First one was that month 4 scenario I was telling about, and it was the engine driver who took me under his wing. Basically stay the course, and I should have known that, but I was in this kind of crisis moment, and he told me to stay the course. The next one was my engine officer at the time when I was driving an engine company, and it was just this narrative about that I had to move up, and that he would not allow me to stagnate. And I was convinced I was going to be a driver the rest of my career. And God bless the guys and gals that do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But he refused to let me give that answer. And I appreciate him for that now, because he saw something in me that I didn't want to see in myself. And then the last one was from the captain of the basic training section when I was brought up there as a lieutenant, and hold a standard. I mean, his ability to hold a standard and hold himself to that standard. And if Mark's on the line, he was an Air Force guy, and jokingly, world's largest airline and all that other good stuff. But at the end of the day, I admired that so much, because there have been times in my career where my ability to just say no and hold that standard, until I really worked for him and understood what that was like in action, that was a big deal. So essentially 3 pieces of advice over the course of my career that have kept me going.
That's awesome. Final question. I think I know the answer. I've got it locked away in my head, but because you're a truck guy. But heavy fire, heavy fire in tenable space. Would you rather be assigned to the nozzle or first in on VES?
Ladder. Give me a ladder. Get me in that window. Get me, to be at that moment, to grab the right ladder, put it the right place, make that window, make that room, close that door, do that search. It's not even a question. The chess game of particularly a truck company, to me, is operating independent of a hose line is significantly more than bringing the water with me. But God bless the engine guys. I know we're support services, if that makes anybody feel better. I'm supporting your operation. I'm good with that.
I love it. All right. Awesome, man. Thank you for doing the 5 questions for firefighters, man. Best place to contact you for your information, or book a class, or get in touch with you.
I'd say the safest thing is, I don't want to get in trouble at work, is I've got a Gmail address, mfpf.davidson@gmail.com.
mfpf.davidson@gmail.
That's an acronym I use for my class on small unit leadership, where I talk about mission first, people first.
Okay.
It's a twist
I kind of wonder what it's for. Okay.
Yeah, that's a twist on the phrase from the Army, and when you talk leadership in general, people, mission first, people always, and to me, they're intertwined. They have to be both cohabitate that same space.
I love it.
mfpf.davidson.
Perfect, sir. Weekly scrap number 37 in the books. I had a blast. I don't think I've
thank
laughed
you very
this
much.
much.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what. This is the first time I've had anybody interview me. I've done one blog before, but that was a group of 4 folks, and I was like, thank God for the beer, that helps out too. I was like, I don't know who wants to listen to me. I don't even want to hear myself talk. So
I enjoyed hearing you talk. You're a natural.
I appreciate the opportunity, and for whoever's out there listening, hopefully something they can take away from it. Oh, can I plug one thing?
Absolutely.
So I'm getting ready to start something that I call Green to Red, and it's based on this idea that for another project in the background for years has been getting my organization to recruit more heavily from the military. And I've just seen a lot of our folks coming out of the service who flounder because they're coming out of this very structured environment, team cohesion, all these other good things. And then they go to college, they go work at Amazon, whatever. And to me, I've seen them and heard the stories where they flounder. And the problem is you go to a TAPS office in just about anywhere in CONUS or anywhere around the world, they're not going to have, generally speaking, a lot of fire department stuff. And unless it was something you grew up with or you knew about, you may not even be considering it. In fact, a majority of the guys that I worked with, because we had all the skill set to be in the house cleaning or food service industry, became cops. Because I did the same thing, cop or firefighter, and I listed it all out. So this project is to do interviews like this with folks that have spent time in the military and then moved into the fire service to explore why it worked, what did they like about it, what was their path to it, and just every service, every rank, every different job, to hit all those different angles and perspectives, so that maybe somebody who's coming out of the service can go, oh, maybe I'll do this firefighting thing. So,
nice, absolutely.
Green to red.
Green to red
is the name of it. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
So I appreciate it.
No, absolutely, man. Anything else you want, you got it. And I'll share me the links, and I'll share anything I can.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for being an unbelievably fun guest. I really had a blast. For everybody else out there, thanks for watching. I hope the tone stays silent unless it's burning, and stay safe out there.